This is Democracy Watch. So, Mark, let's talk about the case that will have the biggest implications for the 2024 race, and that is New York's new maps. So, we've had our final hearing in this case in the state's highest court there. So, what happened during oral arguments?
So, as you point out, this is not just a big case. This is a huge case. This is a case that involves whether or not New York is going to have another map proposed by the nonpartisan, bipartisan Independent Redistricting Commission in time for 2024. So this would be a huge development. And as you point out, the highest court in New York, what they call the Court of Appeals, held its oral argument. Lawyers for both sides. My law partner, Aria Branch, argued it for the voter plaintiffs who brought the lawsuit. And it was a spirited discussion. I think she got 15 seconds into her argument before she got the first set of questions.
And so now what happens next? How do we ultimately get to the point where new maps are adopted in New York?
So as you say, the hearing was held. It was, like I said, very contentious. There are 7 justices who sit on the high court in New York. It's called the New York Court of Appeals, which is a little confusing. And 3 of those justices had previously said that the map that was passed last time violated the state constitution, and 3 of them would have upheld the last map. And there is one new swing justice. So all eyes were on her. And what we are waiting now is an opinion from the 7 justices. I never predict how courts are going to rule, but it certainly seemed like the 3 on each side were kind of dug in a little bit on their position, or at least asking questions that way. And we'll get a decision. I predict we'll get a decision in December from that court that says either no new map or new map. If there's a new map, if they say new map, then the Independent Redistricting Commission will be ordered to produce new maps for the state legislature to consider in early next year, in time for 2024.
Okay, so gaming this out, if the court does order that the commission redraws the maps, how many maps are going to be proposed, and who ultimately decides which map is adopted?
Right. So this is where it gets interesting, right? Because it's a bipartisan commission. So they can either all agree on one map, or they can send 2 maps, which is what happened last time. They sent a Democratic map and a Republican map, and then the legislature actually wound up modifying both of them into yet a 3rd map. But it'll be an interesting tactical decision for Republicans on the commission to decide: do they try to reach a bipartisan map with the Democrats, send a 6-0 map, which then would go into effect, or do they continue to stonewall, send 2 maps, and then leave it to the New York legislature?
Why not go for a 6-0 map if Democrats control the legislature and they have a majority on the highest court in New York?
Because Republicans would rather fight and lose than agree to fair maps. I mean, ask yourself, why did the Alabama legislature, controlled by Republicans, not enact a map that they proposed, rather than that would pass court muster, rather than enacting a ridiculous map they knew wouldn't pass, and then have a court-drawn map? Why does it appear that the Louisiana legislature is not even going to bother responding to the court's opportunity to pass a new map, but instead going to say we're sticking with our own map? Because Republicans seem to have it in their DNA that they would rather play the victim card than participate in a fair process.
And so, I mean, is the worry then to not have that fight because we won't have enough time until 2024? I mean, shouldn't it be baked into the cake that Republicans are going to fight back tooth and nail anyway?
Yeah, they're not going to be able to run the clock in New York. Let me tell you, if there's one thing I'm sure of as I sit here today, they're not going to be able to run the clock in New York. The courts understand what the deadlines are. There is no federal court Purcell principle delay tactic available. This is already before the high court in New York. So we're going to get a decision from the high court that's going to either say, yep, the maps that are in place are okay, or in IRC, you have to pass new maps. If they don't pass new maps, or there's a deadlock of some sort, then the legislature, controlled by Democrats, say we'll pass a map. But one way or another, in that circumstance, you would get new maps for New York. I think the difference is if Republicans decide to play ball and try to come to a compromise map, they might limit their losses relative to if they don't.
Okay, so to that point, what are the best and worst case scenarios for Democratic pickups with any new map that might be put in place in New York?
I think there is a general consensus right now that if the High Court orders the Independent Redistricting Commission to enact new maps, whether that be a compromise 9360 map, or whether that would be a map that the legislature would then adopt on its own, that the pickup for Democrats would be between 4 and 6 seats. So, at the low end, it would be 4, at the high end, it would be 6.
And are there any other states aside from New York that you're keeping an eye on right now that have any developments?
Look, I am following Louisiana very carefully, as is Democracy Docket. Every day it updates people on what's happening in Louisiana. Where, as I mentioned, we are waiting to see if the Republican legislature takes up the opportunity that's been given to them to draw a new map by January 15th, or whether they just do what Alabama did and fold their arms and hold their breath and refuse to do so. And we're also following very carefully Georgia, where, as you know, another state where the Republican legislature violated the Voting Rights Act, found by a federal court to have violated the Voting Rights Act, and we will see what they do there in terms of remedial maps.
Okay, and to that point, you had mentioned Democracy Docket. If anybody isn't yet signed up for Democracy Docket, please sign up. It is the best news outlet that I've come across to focus on everything voting in elections. The link is right here on the screen. Finally, let's end off with this, and this is an issue that you and I have spoken about before, but as we are kind of in the throes of Republicans currently trying to figure out their way out of another government shutdown, I think they just finally passed a continuing resolution that would just get us to like January. What does it say that we are enmeshed in all of this dysfunction as the result of a Republican majority that was born out of what we now know are illegal maps?
Yeah, it's an absolute tragedy for democracy. I hope everyone out there is listening and pays really close attention to this. We say elections have consequences. Well, elections can only have consequences if there are fair rules. If Republicans are able to rig the maps, if Republicans are able to deny voting rights to Black voters in Alabama and Louisiana and Georgia, when you total up, set aside New York for a second. If you total up Alabama, Louisiana, Georgia, Florida, and that's before you get to Texas, you're talking about right there, the denial of voting rights, creating a situation in which this dysfunction is taking place in Washington, D.C. So what did it mean that they were able to cheat and rig the maps for 2022? It means that President Biden and the Democrats can't move forward an agenda that will get through the House of Representatives. Republicans are trapped in this death spiral of MAGA extremism, and the American people are suffering. So the bottom line is, voting matters, elections matter, but so do the rules of voting and the rules of districting, which is why you and I talk about it over and over again. There's really nothing more important for democracy right now.
And just as we head into 2024, let's end off with this. As we head into 2024, a lot of the issues with these maps are being rectified. You and your firm have brought cases in a raft of different states. We've spoken about states from Louisiana, Alabama, South Carolina, Florida, and just the list keeps going on. But do you feel like we're also seeing some steps backwards in states like North Carolina? Do you feel like once we get into 2024, we'll be in a better position, or are we losing ground at the same time that we're gaining it? Like, how do you feel net after we're done with this whole raft of voting rights lawsuits and 14th Amendment lawsuits to create new maps in all of these states, with the way that Republicans are still trying to chip away at Democrats' lead in states where they have majorities?
Yeah, so look, North Carolina was a big setback for 2024 because Republicans have now enacted a massive gerrymander. Stay tuned, everyone, for more on litigation there in the near future. But that's been a step backwards for 2024. The other states that we just mentioned make up that difference, right? The Alabama, Louisiana, Georgia, Florida offset that, if not put Democrats slightly to the good, which brings us back, Brian, to where we started. New York, right? If New York is forced, if New York is ordered to again have a bipartisan commission draw maps, then it will be a net positive for Democrats on the year and on the cycle of probably 4 to 6 seats. If not, then it will probably be a wash. And so as a native New Yorker, someone who grew up in New York, I not just have a professional interest in my firm, having brought the case, and Democracy Docket covering it, But as a person who still has family in New York, I'm rooting every day and hoping every day.
I'm with you there as coming from a long line of Brooklynites. So we'll leave it there.
Me too.
Obviously. So we'll leave it there. Obviously,
maybe they knew each other.
Yeah, that's right. So I think at this point, Mark had mentioned the prospect of maybe some news happening in North Carolina. If you want to stay on top of any news as it breaks, please, again, make sure to sign up for Democracy Docket. It's a news outlet Mark founded to focus on everything voting and elections. The link is right here on the screen. It's also in the post description of this video. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
I'm Marc Elias.
This is Democracy Watch.